sometimes you say you want the machine to do the analytics and take those things that humans cannot do. Like I was very surprised when I learned credit appraisals are done by bots, not anymore done by humans who have some emotion and all that gooey stuff. Like, it's done by bots who decide whether somebody is credit worthy or not. Data entry I can understand. If these things, which in my view need a higher cognitive capability, is done by machines, where are we going? Like, what kind of jobs will be available for humans? One. Second, working with machines, be it bots, be it any other format, how is it the future is going to be very different, where like in some of the science fiction movies, you are going to have a workforce which will have equal number of machines and humans. And that ability to work together and get work done out of a mixed workforce is going to be important.
So I'll take a short at it and maybe others can add on. So in terms of, I'll take the mixed workforce point first, and I think the mixed mode has existed in manufacturing quite some time. Like if you go to the
Correct.
Industrial robots, I think they have been in place, if you go to automobile company, you see that the whole conveyor and process is run by industrial robots, right? So the point in terms of mixed mode, yes, it will stay. The second point in terms of, about the decisions and judgments, I think the whole pattern would shift from, if you talk about data and analytics, it would shift from earlier the challenge was getting the data, which is much easier now. I think probably the value add is now in terms of analyzing the patterns. Jacob used a word in terms of, how the attitude. I would say the other thing that's very critical is the pattern and the judgment, because anybody, would credit appraisal, as you said, right? One, you're getting more data, but whatever is coming out from the data, you need to still understand that and make a judgment. So I think it's more shifting towards that how well you are able to analyze and judgment. And again, machines sometimes gives you the patterns, but it doesn't give you the decision. It's probably left to human being, again, depending on the context.
So there's the role for humans still there.
Absolutely.
Now, it is, but how do you train people for this? Like, in today, when you go to schools, colleges, skill development institutions, the environment doesn't have robots sitting with them and they are learning to work with, somebody who, is not same as you. And how do you teach them? What is the kind of syllabus that we can have? What is the kind of curriculum that we can have for such mixed work groups? What kind of, skills would be relevant there?
So as I said, as I said, 3 levers. First one is, of course, changing the basic curriculum that a college or a government prescribes, and that takes time. That won't happen overnight. But of course, all of us can focus on the other two. So one is joint curriculum, as I mentioned about the MBA program. Or when you do this, and we do a lot in terms of how we partner with institutes. Now, if you talk about starting early, and again, talking about WNS, we have WNS Cares Foundation, which actually goes to schools. And there, and actually, I've been to the WCB events where you actually take a robot and, see the excitement in the kids. So I think, from a society point of view, all of us acknowledge that there is a change coming in, and there are multiple ways to absorb those changes. And I think talking about today's people, as I said, the millennials that I get to see at work every day, you don't need to tell them that, this is what you should do. They'll actually figure out themselves, what they need to learn, what they need to do, what should be the next plan. So that way, I would say, absolutely.
The other aspect is the workplace itself is changing a lot. And in terms of businesses, I once upon a time used to think the Times of India group is into media. Then I realized they are also into media. They are doing, so how do you define what is work? And even within that, when you talk about digital media and people who spent 10, 20 years doing this suddenly see their work completely changing. Yeah. So how do you skill from a digital context, from a new context, existing employees? Forget freshers who are going to be taught outside. How do you manage that? I'm sure, I can see your group changing dramatically in the past 10 years. How do you manage your workforce?
I think it's just to bring all up to date, it's a 180-year-old group.
I know, yeah.
And we call ourselves media and entertainment company as such. But yes,
but you are into everywhere. You are into banking, you run a university, anything.
Yeah, but basically it's a media entertainment. Yes, now we have a Bennett University as well. So that's a, I'd say, a breeding ground for all the new talents that we are developing. So that all the curriculums which are now coming, they're actually affiliated with all the West European or North Americans, which are slightly more abreast than the Indian universities have been in the past. But they are in terms very much abreast with the latest what's happening. One thing that like taking to the past, I was seeing one of the infographics where they're saying data is the new oil. Now what does that mean is, in the last 10 years or so, amongst the top 10 Fortune companies, they were, most of them were oil companies, Exxon and all that you see. Now of the top 10 companies, all are mostly technology companies or data companies. That's where data is the new oil is being termed, although there are many other connotations around that. And then industry 4.0 is just coming in, or already has come in. So we are seeing we started with bots, but then you got then machine learning interjected with it, you got deep learning with it, you got cognitive with it, and it's just proliferating. And then you have big data where you are processing variability of velocity and volumes, all the three V's that are very making the edge intelligent, as they call it. Now somebody is doing all this at the background, which is coming from the industry, for all the same students who are now becoming more learned or developing these things. A shift I have seen in the past and now is even the school kids are now coming for apprenticeship into our organization. I have seen.
Wow.
I have never seen that in the past.
Wow.
So there is a deep connect which is developing between the education and industry at the start itself, nascent stage itself. And you see even in graduation, the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, they are all coming for internship. I have never done it during my engineering, I did in the third year, but I see now they are doing in first, and they are very particular about, they don't want to do the same thing every year, they want to do different thing. So the capacity of the new millennials, I'll say, is much larger than what we have seen in the past, as our Mr. Brahma has been telling. They are, and the technologies now are very intuitive also, so it's much more easier to grasp. Probably being a digital refugee age group will not be able to appreciate it, but if you talk to the digital natives who are like born with phones or devices, handheld devices in the hands, they are pretty comfortable with using the devices, learning about a lot of things. You would invariably see people telling, my kid automatically knew this without me telling him, or even I didn't know it. Where did he learn? So that's the, I think, next generation is coming up on that, and it's a encouraging sign. And I think they are much more it's not just the attitude, as Jacob was telling them, it's even about the adaptation. So they are very adaptable. There's a Darwin theory comes into, so they are very adaptable to the new stuff which is coming up. And we don't know what we don't know. It could be that Industry Revolution 5.0 may be there, which we don't know, even in what form or shape it may be there. But these are certain aspects, I think, which the new generation is coming out, breaking the shackles of the traditional modes that they have actually been brought up by us. Even now, I will say, there are challenges where they have to crack this exam, so we have to come out of that mode of cracking the exams to what they are learning. So learning has to probably take precedence over the cracking the exams or getting the scores.
So many times, and there is PISA scores that come up, and there's ACER study that has been done. So it's not, the problem is known. The solution is not known. Suppose I say, like, we all know that rote learning has to go and we need to do all other stuff. Now my worry is, in the gig economy, I don't know what to teach. I'm an electronics and communication engineer, and once upon a time, the huge circuits that I used to learn and be very proud of, is something that today's kids don't even want to learn. What's the fun? See, if there is a mobile phone, is there a need to know what is inside the mobile phone? Should I not focus on what can be done with the mobile? So are we moving into a very different kind of learning where we are not getting into, like we used to, like in various different aspects of it? Can we stick to what is useful for us?
I think it's more to do with the evolution. We are at the cusp of it, as what Mr. Brahma was saying about these OCRs and all that you can use. I'll not be surprised if instead of teachers, these bots start checking the papers of these students, and maybe artificial intelligence can supplement them to give much more better scoring than what they are getting through these human-based.
No, it's already happening in fact. So script-based answer checking or machine-based answer checking is already happening.
So maybe we can break this barrier of doing the volumes in a short time through bots even in the future with some artificial intelligence built into them.
See, just another perspective to that, and specifically that we are also talking about India, is that India also has a scale problem, right? That a lot of these solutions, like what WNS is trying to do, or some of these solutions around people doing interning while they are in schools, is still a very evolved, or they evolved, or if I can say, a very metro phenomena, right? But India has a huge scale problem, and specifically unless we solve the supply side constraints at a scale, there are other social problems that can come and hit us clearly. The second to your point, which is while a lot of these youngsters come and do and show a lot of enthusiasm around, how do you ensure that, again, there are two aspects to it. One, the shelf life of what they have come in with is very, very small. So the shelf life of the skills is very small. Second, their own willingness to do something for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years in itself is very, very small, right? So
5 months.
5 months probably,
about 5
right?
years, yeah.
So if you want to solve the scale problem, which requires certain standardization, right, versus the industry requirement, right? I'll be honest, right? So if while WNS can come to an NIT university and solve a problem, it takes us some months to create a curriculum and whatever, and by the time we do that, the industry requirement has changed.
In fact, I used to say, we have institutions that teach the curriculum of the past today for something that needs to happen in future. How are we going to bridge this?
So if I can take a shot at two things that has changed, and you talked about your engineering days, for me also, see, one thing is the learning has become more experiential. It's less classroom and more, what you see or what you do. And the second thing, the ability to self-learn has increased a lot. I mean, we couldn't imagine it. I mean, in our college days, there's no way you have to go to the class, sit in the class and go through a lecture. Now and if you look at the way technology has changed, the computing power in this phone is probably more than the
Apollo,
in the
rocket that launched.
So I think what's very important for us, so it's constantly a catch-up game, and I don't think you can actually predict that this is going to the demand, and so hence I'll plan for this supply. That will probably never happen. We are probably operating on a pattern-based model that, okay, we know that yes, there is data. So why I talked about the computing power, about data. See, data has been there, now we are generating more and more data. But data is useless, like the oil, unless you actually do the refining, right? Unless you refine the data and get some analytics out of it. Data itself is of no use, right? I mean, it has been lying there, right? So I think to your point in terms of predicting the demand, I think all of us as a country or as a race, looking at those patterns, that these are the next few things that probably can work or should work, and then work towards that. By the time you learn that, you're probably moving on to something else, and we'll have to see how fast this is, because the shelf life is reducing. So that will be a phenomenon to watch for.
I also believe now there will be like your, the credit score, there will be a skill score as well, like, what are the skills that you have, because if I want to hire somebody, I may not now go by only what I see or what I do in interviews. I want to know what are the various skill sets that you have gathered over a period of time. So if I were to ask you on the digital space, and then we'll do like a fast whatever, what has changed in your workplace and in the terms of skill sets that you are looking at more from a digital data analytics space? What do you think has significantly changed?
See, again, the type of skills that we are looking for, in the past most of them were not non-existent. So it's about getting people who are much smarter, thinking on the feet, that immediately are a fast learner, I would say. More of a generalist we see rather than
Generalist,
specifics.
okay.
And of course, we look for more of a team players. If you take sort of an example from the World Cup, the team which reached the final, one of them didn't had any star players. They were good team players.
Absolutely.
The Croatia, I think that was Croatia. So it's more of if we can get good team players who can work together rather than being very self-centered. Unfortunately, our academics today are
Not doing that.
not on that.
No, it's a valid point. In fact, I would like to pause you there, saying the one trend that I see is I don't want specialists.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to do with specialists. They might be expensive, they might think whatever, they are not flexible. So I don't want. And the second thing that you also said is that, I also want, people of different skill sets. Like,
Yeah.
Earlier there was a definition of who is successful, there's a definition of who gets promoted and who moves on to the next level and other stuff. Now what you're essentially saying is, in my new economy, I might need, especially in the digital space, I don't need one particular skill set
Yes.
that is going, because I need all. So do you agree? I mean, is that reflective of what's happening in across?
And maybe to add the complexity, I would say for a lot of organizations, they have a single business model that they are working. Now in our organization, you have a multiple business streams, and there are a lot of creative people around. And yes, we don't have a challenge of what you say diversity in that, because fortunately our organization is very compassionate in that grounds, and we have a lot of
But is that a solution that is diversity necessarily bringing in more innovation?
I could say that, because innovation is one of our strong suits of our organization. That's how it's been surviving for years over years. And the sort of freedom it gives to people to innovate and take, so we encourage everybody to keep putting out their ideas. So we have like websites where people keep giving their ideas. We select every quarter, and then we even reward them, recognize them across. And their ideas are even implemented in the business. So they see it's not just ideas in the...
And look at it from the other angle. If you are running a university or you are running a skill development institution, what do? I mean, suddenly the demand is changing and they are asking, and what do I teach?
So I actually am very pleasantly surprised. Like, we have courses on artificial intelligence also running in Bennett University. And when we actually encourage students from there to come and do internship with us.
You do? Okay.
And we are actually surprised that the quality of product or the quality of workmanship they are churning out is absolutely industry standard. So getting that from a students at like engineering graduates or MBA graduate, that sort of an output I have not seen in the past. So that's where I'm saying the new generation is also very, very adaptive to the new stuff that's coming up.
Is it because of the institution or is it because of the ecosystem? I thought
See,
the learning that they get today is very different from the learning that.
So institution nurtures their thought process and the way they need to work. But
so they
then
trigger it, okay.
They can test it or test by the fire, as you call it, see in the industry how it is relevant to them, and the moment it's relevant, I think they have cracked the code.
Interesting.